Hi, I'm Andrew Wallace, and welcome to the We've Got a Problem podcast, where each week we explore inspiring stories of struggle, success, and solutions to prevalent problems and how our guests have turned a problem into an opportunity. This week, I'm joined by Brian Gelt, CEO of Peoplelytics, who helps companies implement a data-driven approach to hiring, motivation, and retention. His goal is to help companies put people in the right jobs so they're happier, more productive, and remain with the firm for as long as possible. That's a cause I think we can all get behind. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, you're helping companies with hiring, motivation, retention, things like that, but you had a long career in the car business. What brought you from there to here?
Well, so the software that I use is through a company called Predictive Index. And I was actually a client for about 15 years before I decided to become a partner. So I learned to use this tool in running my own businesses and in hiring, retaining, and motivating my team.
Right. Absolutely. When I worked in the financial services business, we were always talking to financial advisors about trying to remember all three components of the money equation, right? You're trying to bring money into the firm. You're trying to develop your existing clients. So you're trying to acquire, develop, and you want to retain. And the big one that a lot of people miss out on is the retention, right? Okay, I'm going to go out, get new people. I'm going to get new money, get all this stuff. But watching the stuff walk out the door, especially with people, right, who you've invested time in training and those kinds of things, I imagine that's huge.
It is. And a lot of the turnover comes right in the beginning. We see it when I'm working with a lot of my clients. Their turnover's in 4, 5, 6 months, which really just goes to job fit, right? Which means we hired somebody who wasn't a really good fit for the job. The hard part is in that first 4, 5, or 6 months, you've done nothing but invest, right? So you poured money in, and just when you're on the verge of them being worth their salary, out the door they go.
Hey, that's, I liken it a bit to when Ford did an analysis in the 1920s. They found that they were basically training customers for other manufacturers, right? All they had was the Model T. So you might buy a Model T as your first car, but you'd upgrade to anything else after that.
That's right.
Once you'd seen it. And so you're training people to go to some other place and do better. You've invested all your money training these people. Are just starting to. Man, that's that's a hard one. So what's the trick?
So the trick is understanding the behavioral demands of a job, right? So every job, I want you to imagine, an accountant's job is different from a salesperson's job, right? And yet we don't really fundamentally understand what those differences are. And so we end up putting in people into jobs that aren't a good fit for it. Mm-hmm. We put people that are naturally more reserved in a sales role because we don't know any better, right? Or we put people that are, not particularly precise or accurate in a role that requires nothing but precision and accuracy. Mm-hmm. And so what we find, especially with new people to the role or younger people, is they just don't like the work. So they've gone to school and they've tried, they've learned, and it's one thing to learn from a book and to sit in school and do all that. But then they get out there and they realize that they're 6 months in and they go, God, I don't like this.
Yeah. Yeah. So people get that with, lawyers go to law school and get out and they don't actually like being lawyers. They like the idea of being a lawyer, but not what
actually law firms are a very big opportunity, because when you look at what where's revenue generated in a law firm, you're right. It's going out getting new business. Well, you got to be able to do the law, but in order to get new business, that's part salesperson.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And I think, that like Daniel Pink in Daniel Pink, hopefully that's it, in To Sell Is Human, was talking about the fact that these days, almost all of us are involved in some sort of sales. Correct. We don't think of it that way, but we are, right? Non-sales selling, those kinds of things. Going out and getting clients is huge. That's where the business comes from in law. And actually, if you're a sole proprietor, you've still got to sell, even if you're not selling sales.
Absolutely. And you may not think it's selling sales, but you are. You're out there acquiring new business. And so in a larger firm, you might have people that are out there that are, just generating new business and then you've got associates that are doing the work.
Right.
Right. So that certainly happens all the time.
Well, I mean, part of the question is why. Well, I have like several questions, but part of the question is why is it taking companies so long to focus on these kinds of things, and even today, why aren't more companies focusing on, say, taking a more data driven approach to these kinds of things?
Yeah, I think let me. I'll try and answer your questions in order, right? Why aren't people doing this, right? Why aren't companies doing this? And the truth is, we've done what we've done for so long that it's just been, we just do that, and we just expect the churn. We expect that there's going to be those issues, and there really doesn't have to be. And some companies do it different, and some companies do it better than others, for sure, right? But part of what we see is there is a greater adoption now of data, right? And whether that's data and algorithms in your apps on your phone, or what ads you're served or what shows you want to watch, there's a greater general acceptance of those algorithms and that data. But no one understands really how to apply it to work, right? So what we do, and when Predictive Index, which is actually a 70-year-old company, has been working on this science and this data for that long, since World War II, and it takes a relearning of the process, right? It's understanding, it's really defining in data-driven terms, what are the demands of this job? It's different than just saying, hey, John or Jane might be great at that, let's try them.
Right.
It's understanding what are the demands of the job.
Yes.
And then finding people that are going to be a natural fit for it. Because the truth is, if they like the work, they're more productive, they're happier, they stay longer, they take constructive criticism better, right? I mean, if you hate your job, the first time your boss says, hey, you're screwing up, you say, okay, I quit.
Right. Yes. Right. Especially in a business like automotive, where there's already such churn just by nature of sales and people going other places. Yeah, for sure. And the Radical Candor, I think, is one of the big books that a lot of people have been reading in the workplace about how they handle interpersonal interactions at Google and Apple and all those kinds of things. And people, I mean, already people kind of bristle at constructive criticism by nature of it. But when there's like, I don't even like this job, I'm not, and I don't feel like I'm getting paid my worth, and blah, 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 whatever's going on, especially when you have to be patient about some of those things. And like, I'm just starting to hit my stride here. Right. For sure, that you got to be getting something out of it. You got to, and as a manager, I'm sure you have to be able to say to people, you're the right guy for this job, and here's why, and here's how I know, and here's what we're going to do, and we've got a plan, and let's move forward, and you got this.
Yeah, and you're right there. And part of what I help these companies do is I actually give them coaching tools.
Okay. Because
nobody's perfect, right? Nobody's ever perfect.
Right.
So if we find somebody who's a good fit for a job, and maybe they need a little coaching in one way or another, the old way of coaching was, hey, you need to be this, or you need to be that. And it's not very effective. So we really try and look at, here's the demands of the job. Here's an area where maybe you don't match up all that perfectly. Let's figure out together how we can bridge that gap. And those behavior modifications, if you want to use a psychology term, right? Those behavior modifications stick better when the employee figures it out on their own.
For sure. So who's your kind of ideal client right now? Are you doing a lot of stuff? I mean, given your experience, 35 years in the car business, are you working with a lot of dealerships? Or are you working with? Okay.
Frankly, my business applies to any company with people.
Sure.
So I do have a lot of car dealerships simply because of my background in the automotive business. In fact, my client base represents 94 different dealerships.
Okay.
But I also have everything from banks to manufacturing to retail to uh, just about every type of organization that you can think of. That's anybody who's got people.
Right, for sure. And I mean, as far as size of organization and things like that, that kind of tailor made for you, what would you say your ideal client is? As far
Yeah,
as,
probably ideal clients are somewhere in that 4 to 500
okay.
employee range. But I do have clients that have 30 people,
Mm-hmm.
and we have very specific, they have specific needs that we work on together. And I have clients with 1,000 and 1,200, and they have
Right.
different needs.
Well, I imagine there's something that comes along with being at a certain level. If you're a company of 5 people, it's pretty easy to actually know the people that you're working with. When you get to be a couple hundred people, you really need to start putting in a systematized approach to hiring, retention,
Well,
growth,
I
things
think
like that.
yes and no. Right? You're right. Certainly, the people. If you've only got 5 people, you touch them all, you interact with them all every day, right?
Sure.
That doesn't necessarily mean you know how to get along, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to leverage each person's individual strengths to make that team stronger, which is a big part of what we do. And that's about, it's about self-awareness, and it's about, how to utilize strengths to build a more cohesive and stronger team.
Right.
Certainly when you get to a larger organization and it goes from, one person who's in charge of three different tasks to now I've got 8 people in this task and 8 people in that task. Sure, we're able to more clearly define the task, and try and do so a little more specifically, and
Mm-hmm.
and so we tailor make those to the specific client.
Right. Okay. So another thing that goes along with that is we've talked about coming in with a data-driven approach to hiring, but you're going into companies, of course, with entrenched and established employee bases,
Yes.
and so you've got to figure out both here's how to fix all the problems that we're having right now, and here's how to not have those problems in the future with the next people we hire.
Yeah.
How do you deal with entrenched culture, things like that?
Oh, well,
And
that's just nothing but fun. I mean, you're right. Sometimes it takes a whole lot of persistence,
yeah,
and sometimes it just takes a little bit of magic, right? When you can go into an executive leadership team, and I can talk with 7 or 8 people and identify the characteristics of those people and how they may interact together, and in an hour session start to highlight what could be the strengths and what are probably some of the weaknesses, and they go, oh my gosh, that's happening right now.
yeah,
And when I can look at somebody's profile, their behavioral assessment results, and understand, what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses in the workplace, and how is that working, and sometimes their manager says, wow, okay, you're exactly right, how do I fix that? It's like you were working next to me and you've never even met this person, because we all have our traits, we are who we are, right?
right,
So it takes a little bit of work and it takes a little bit of time, because you're right, people don't like change a whole lot. But
no,
when we can show people a simple, easy tool to give them more understanding of the people around them, and how to retain them, how to motivate them, how to make them better at their job, and not in a, it's not in a superficial, let me push your buttons kind of way. It's in a, let me understand how you work best,
mm-hmm.
and let me serve it up to you on a platter, so every time you can knock it out of the park.
Right, right. It's a mutual understanding
It is.
of how to work best with each other and all those kinds of things with interpersonal relationship advice here. And again, the tips and tricks, that's what's so crucial. Even then, I wonder, have you struggled with getting buy-in from, because I imagine taking this kind of an approach requires getting buy-in up and down the line. And if it breaks down somewhere along the process and somebody goes, yeah, they're trying to get us to do all this BS, but we're just going to do it the same way we've always done it. How do you confront that, or do you have a ready-made spear?
Yeah, it depends on who I'm dealing with, but sometimes very directly, and sometimes it just takes a long time. I mean, I have some clients that, they are embracing the idea, and so we're working together to try and figure out how can they implement it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They love that. And then there are other clients that you're right. I've got, there's a group of people over here that love it. They've embraced it. They're working it for their department. And then I've got the rest of the organization who doesn't even want to talk to me. That happens, and it just takes time. And I take a little bit different view of it because it is a software tool, but it's a software tool that comes with a whole lot of expertise and a lot of tools and a lot of things. And because I was a client and I used it to run my businesses, I understand exactly what it does. Yeah. And I understand how to make it actionable.
Well, give me a little bit insight into when you were using it to run your business. Did you start using that at Galpin, or was this when you transitioned over to Keys?
When I transitioned over to Keys, at Keys Motors, they've actually used it before I got there. So I learned about it at Keys. Galpin had used something similar, but I found Predictive Index, which is the software tool. Predictive Index is far superior. It's faster, it's easier, and everything is actionable. Mm-hmm. So when I learned this, it helped me do a couple of things. First of all, it helped me hire better. It helped me find people. We call it the skinny resume, but I stopped looking for people with experience. And mm-hmm. the automotive business has a lot of entry level jobs, which is fantastic. And they can be well compensated entry level jobs. They're not all, minimum wage type jobs. There can be some very well compensated jobs that start as an entry level role.
Right.
But you got to find the people with the right behavioral instincts. And so I was able to use Predictive Index to do that. And by doing so, I stopped looking for the person who was the journeyman car salesperson who's worked at 5 different dealerships and washed out of all of them at some point, for some reason. It didn't interest me. I felt there was a certain way that we could do the job better. Mm-hmm. And so I started looking for people with no experience, but with the right set of, again, the right set of behaviors, of their natural behaviors that were well suited to the job. And I was blessedly able to create a really strong team, hire a lot of people. They didn't all work, but my success rate was a heck of a lot better than without.
Right. Yeah. Well, it obviously worked because Keys Audi became number 1 in volume in the United States?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. For a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've been from number 1 to number 1. For folks who don't know, Galpin Ford is the number 1 volume Ford dealer in the world. They're a huge operation out in North Hills, I guess, and they've got to the point that they've got a restaurant on site, so that while you're shopping for your car, getting your car serviced, you can walk over to the horseless carriage and get a Galpuccino. The interesting thing for me in looking at the car business, and I hope you won't mind if we talk about it a little bit because I'm just fascinated with it, but the fascinating thing about the car business lately has been the ascendancy of big conglomerates who are buying all these dealerships. I think Lithia just bought all the Keys dealerships here in Van Nuys. And Galpin is their own little dealer group, right? They've just got their thing going on, but for the most part, a lot of these smaller organizations are getting snapped up. How is that changing the business?
Well, let me correct a couple of things. First of all, Lithia didn't buy all of Keys stores; they bought some.
Oh, okay.
So Keys Motors still operates and has a number of dealerships. And I love when you refer to Galpin as their own little dealer group. I mean, their own little dealer group is still top 25 in the country. I mean,
right? Yeah, no.
Yeah, it's big. It's a big organization with, probably 1,300 employees, something along those lines.
But it's still in the Bachman family, right? With
It is.
Bert,
It
Brandon,
is
and
still
Bo.
yeah, still a family company. Yeah. And you're right. There are these big conglomerates that are buying up smaller dealerships and smaller dealership groups. And, in some cases, they're using public money to do it, right? They borrowed on the cheap, and they bought a lot of dealerships. And there's a lot that comes with that kind of size and volume. I mean, because of franchise laws, they're not paying any less for cars or anything like
Right.
that. They're not paying any less for parts. I mean, that's all consistent across the board, whether you're dealing with a group that owns 300 stores or 2 stores. But where there is a lot of value is in common hiring practices.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Practices and common, paperwork practices and shared business offices. So there are some economies of scale. There are a number of economies of scale that can work well.
Right.
And certainly, you look at AutoNation; they have their own finance arm.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, part of what I'm curious about is it used to be, in the mind of a lot of people, it used to be, Rob Williams Ford, the guy's name was on the thing, and he had that dealer and maybe he had something else, but they were doing everything in-house, and everybody kind of had their own little way they did things. So you could shop one dealer and go to another and get a completely different experience. And unifying some of those things include, especially the purchase process, the hiring process, how they get people in there. And I imagine that's a huge opportunity for folks like you to now bring a data-driven approach when it's, the owner of the dealer hiring everybody, and he's got 12 guys. Then it's a completely different.
It is a different ballgame, and you're right. Some would say it's a little less personal, right? I mean, dealerships in general. Of course, this is my background, so I'm fond of them, right? And I'm a big believer in the dealers and the dealer network. They are still really local organizations, and they still support a lot of local causes, and they hire a lot of people. They tend to be welcome. On average, the average salary at a dealership is higher than your average salary across the board. So they definitely provide a lot. The tax revenue for the cities and states is just astronomical. So there's a lot there. Sure, there are some concerns that when you have these giant conglomerates, that owning hundreds of dealerships, that, is there really a person you can go knock on their door and say, I'm not happy? Well, probably not as much.
Right.
That's true. And a lot of these companies are finding smarter, better ways to do things. They because of their scale, they're able to work closely with the manufacturers and find smarter, more efficient ways to do business for both parties.
Right.
And ultimately, that's a good thing, right? Because that results in better pricing for consumers and things.
Yeah. And if you can drive, if anytime you can drive costs down or increase efficiencies, you can greatly improve the lives of everybody. Right. That's the U.S. economy in a nutshell. Is okay. Get more efficient. Get better at doing things. Less time. Less investment. Just rock and roll.
Right.
The interesting thing for me when it comes to talking about dealerships is and franchise laws and all this that people have lately been talking about when it comes to cars and stuff like that with Tesla, who tries to sell direct to consumer and all that. The people underappreciate the fact that having a broad dealer network, as say Ford does, is crucial to having a local service arm to take care of problems, right? You've got small Ford stores, big Ford stores, big towns, small towns, places that might not make sense if you were coordinating it on a corporate basis. Here's the place we're going to put the dealer, and you got to drive 50 miles to get to the service center or whatever goes wrong. Ford has a dealership network, GM, all these places have
Right.
huge dealership networks that you are dealing with. Even if it's owned by a conglomerate, you're dealing with somebody who's right there local and able
Correct.
to take care of you and actually service you. And service is huge.
It is. Yeah, it is huge. The dealer network, and that's why I'm so fond of the dealer network, and there is a lot of conversation about, hey, maybe dealerships should go away, right? Well, careful what you wish for. First of all, dealerships, it's all about competition, right? And the current marketplace is, if you want a car, you got to pay sticker or above to get the car, and that's just the way it is. Well, that's a very short-lived phenomenon, and it's been a couple of years. It's probably going to be another year or more before things start to equalize. But there were times where dealers were tripping over each other to try and give a car away, and we always used to laugh that we buy them at retail from the manufacturer and sell them at wholesale to the customer. That's sometimes where the market was, right?
Yeah.
Now it's flipped, and it'll flip again. That's just the nature of capitalism. But
and in this world of information symmetry, right? It used to be, if you were going into a dealer in the 70s, let's say, the invoice price was locked in a safe. The salesman didn't even know what it was. Right. And now, on my phone, I've got every manufacturer to dealer holdback, the thing that I've got every piece of information I could ever want. And we're talking about the same thing. And really it's coming down to, is that the car you want or not? And we're going to buy it, and we're going to do the deal. And, as long as you treat me fairly, we're going to walk out of here and we'll all be happy.
And there will definitely be some of, there is some of that. And part of the data, it's really valuable. And yes, you can know all the information, but ultimately it's probably going to come down to, do I want it and what's it cost, right?
Right.
And consumers, part of that quote unquote transparency means I know I'm paying them a profit.
Right.
And, the consumer has always assumed that the car dealerships made 20 and 30% profit, but
the manufacturer doesn't make 20 and 30% profit.
You're right. They don't, but they assumed that the dealership did. And the average margin, it's a little higher now, but the average margin for years was about 3%. Yeah. So, and the average dealership operated on about a 1.5 to 2% margin across the whole organization. So talk about an awful lot of people with a very thin margin line,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, used cars have a little bit higher margins than new cars and things like that.
Yeah, they do. And consumers will get used to it, and consumers will at some point just focus on what's the price I get and what am I getting for it.
Yeah.
So we'll get there, and there'll be a little more parity. Is everything going to go to MSRP? I don't know. I don't foresee that happening. I think that at some point, some of these other manufacturers may need a dealer network. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit. We've talked for a while, and I've been fascinated about it, but I want to make sure the listeners are still engaged. Talk to me about kind of the biggest fallacy in your business, or that you see in businesses you deal with, that people think it's true, but it just turns out to be utter BS when it comes to this process.
That's a good question. When it comes to, my process and data, I guess probably one of the biggest obstacles I run into and the biggest fallacies is, people saying, I don't want to know that information. You're going to pigeonhole someone. You're going to say they can't do a job because they're this way or that way, right? They don't fit the profile, so you wouldn't hire them, and you might miss out on some good people. And well, I suppose that's true. That's not how it's really designed. In a vacuum, you could make that argument, but it's designed to understand people, and we build out a data enhanced interview process so that I understand where a candidate might work really well and some areas of the job where they might struggle. So a typical interview process today is I interview a candidate, I verify their resume, which is mostly BS anyhow, but I verify what I think is their resume. I get a feeling, do I like this person, not like this person? And I'm like, thumbs up, good to go, right? Well, that doesn't really give you any insight as to whether they're going to like the work, whether they're going to be any good at the job. So we try to provide a little data, and that data gives me more talking points with the candidate. Mm-hmm. And lets me know, there are some areas that they might be an exceptional fit for the job, right? They might be, if I have a sales role, they might be really outgoing and social, and that's a good part of it. And I want to, it'll enable me to confirm some of that. Well, they may not be have quite the sense of urgency that the job needs. So I want to explore that and see how people adapt, right? So to come back to your question on, what's the biggest fallacy? The fallacy is some people thinking, well, it pigeonholes, well, it doesn't. Really what it does is it enables me to understand people. I use my car lingo. I like to get a little under their hood, right? I want to get a little under their hood and ask some questions about how they think, how they process information, how they would respond in certain situations that I know are going to come up in this job.
Yep.
Right. And if they respond in a positive way, well, good candidate, right?
Right.
And if they respond in a negative way, I should probably pass.
Right. Well, and I think the talking about pigeonholing people, you go, we might miss out on a few candidates. That's probably natural. The thing is, we're going to get more good candidates than we would from the other process, right? This is an improved process we're going through. Absolutely. It's not perfect.
Absolutely. No, and you're exactly right. So that's our ability to try and find those candidates that don't have the experience, right? And you may have a company that, listen, they only want to hire experience because nobody wants to bother to teach or train. Sure. Okay. At least you know who you are, right?
Right.
But most companies are saying, the old saying used to be hire for attitude, train for skill, right? I like to say we hire for fit and train for skill, right? So if I can hire somebody with a good behavioral fit for the job, I can teach them. And I can teach them because they like the work. They show up every day eager for more.
Yes. Yeah. Right? And I mean, who wouldn't want that? Somebody eager for more. Yeah. That's what we're all looking for. I'd love to show up for a job eager for more.
Absolutely.
So what would you say the most underrated concept is? What are people really overlooking? I mean, is it just that you find good people, or people who want to do the job? What are people missing?
I think part of what people are missing is it's about self-awareness. And so part of what I've learned, and I've learned it over decades as well, right, in having a lot of employees and understanding the data part of PI, is understanding who I am, what are my triggers, right? What do I like? What don't I like? And understanding how that's going to affect you, my coworker or my employee. Because if I can understand that, first of all, I don't have to light your fire every day, right? Because I understand it's already lit. I also don't need to push your buttons every day because at least I know what they are and I know what mine are. I would hire people and I would tell them, because I learned myself, I would say, listen, I have a problem. I'm going to tell you half the information and I'm going to expect you to know the other half. There's no way that you can know the other half, but I want you to know I didn't do that on purpose. That's just how I am. That's who I am. So I know I do that. So when you say to me, Brian, you only gave me half, I'm not going to get upset. I'm not going to get mad. I'm going to go, oh, damn, I did it again. And I'll give you the rest of the information, because you can't do your job without all the information. And I know I have this issue. It's because I gave you half the thought and I'm already thinking about something else.
Right. I'm 2 steps ahead.
Yeah. I'm gone, right? I'm out of the conversation and you haven't got it all. Right. And so understanding how I work and how that affects others gives me the ability to make them better at their job.
Yeah.
And the better they are at their job, the easier mine gets.
Brian, thank you so much for joining me today. If you want to know more about Brian, you can check him out on LinkedIn and on his website at peoplelytics.com. Both those links will be in the description. Until next time, I'm Andrew Wallace, and we don't have a problem. We've got an opportunity.